Oh, she's going to do roll call.
Director Daniels.
Here.
Director Alante Keys is absent. Director Karen Hemphill.
Present.
Director Angelo Paraiso Arroyo is also excused tonight. Director Judy Appel.
Here.
Vice President Ty Alper.
Here.
President Beatriz Leiva Cutler.
Presente. So now we'll look at our agenda, approve our agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any requested changes? Okay, for the agenda on item 12.8 on the superintendent's employee contract, 12.1, I'm sorry, we will be looking at additional minor edits that need to be addressed, and we'll come back to the board at another meeting. So I will pull our action item for tonight. I also wanted to, I know it's an information item, but I just wanted to, for staff who are present for our Bears and pre-K program, if we are just going to accept that as an information, or did board members want to discuss and keep staff here? So it's just, we're taking it as information. Board members? Just as information. Okay. So for our staff, thank you very much. It was a great, we got all our information. Okay, so with those notes,
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
okay, a motion by Director Alper and a second by Director Daniels. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, I'm voting. I'm voting against.
You're not voting?
I'm voting no on the agenda.
You're voting no on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. No on the agenda?
Well, we didn't discuss the amendment, but I don't support pulling that item.
Okay. Okay. So Director Appel, Director Appel voted no on the agenda on the pulling of the item. So next, I provide an overview of tonight's meeting. We'll be addressing several important topics. We have both consent, action, and discussion agenda items. Board members are welcome in their comments to also highlight items on the agenda that I may have not captured. On consent, we have a support for a bond measure that would help to match funds to support a facilities bond for career technology education facilities, upgrade of classrooms and new classrooms. A vote yes means that the board of BUSD supports through a resolution this Bond Act of 2016 that will be on the November ballot. Tonight's discussion, we'll hear first draft of the Local Control Accountability Plan, or LCAP, for the school year for 16-17. We will receive an update on the plan from our staff. The plan describes the actions and expenditures that are expected to improve our student outcomes. Tonight, the board will discuss a first draft, and keeping in mind that we're all looking to ensure that the LCAP is targeting funding and is following the intended special population of our students. The board will also hear a report on BSEP planning process, our voter poll, our work groups, and conversations with the community, with some good news and an update on the BSEP planning process. So I talked to you about child development. Now we're going to begin the meeting first with a welcome to our public, to begin being engaged and coming out to be informed about Berkeley schools, and also to welcome the community that is watching online. The Vice President, we have some speaker cards here, and we'll hear all of them, and they have 3 minutes. In addition, it's a particular practice to first hear from our students, and if we have any on a particular issue. If your name is called, you may cede your time to another speaker. To do so, please rise when it's your time to speak, and by ceding your time, you forego your opportunity to speak at tonight's meeting on that issue, and no one can cede their time to you to speak on that issue. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. If someone wants to cede their time to you, no speaker may speak for more than 3 minutes. When there's a larger number of speaking cards, we sometimes limit it to 2, but tonight it will be for 3. At the President's discretion, extra time will be given to those who need translation or have speech needs. When there's 1 minute left, the light at the lectern will turn yellow. When the time has elapsed, the light at the lectern will turn red, and you will hear a beeping. If you're still speaking when your time is up, you're allowed to finish your sentence. Please do not try to speak beyond that. We all understand that it's really important issues about which many people feel very passionate about. However, in fairness to all speakers, we will cut you off. I will cut you off or ask that the mic be turned off. Please do not take it personally. It's our goal to be respectful to everyone, and I ask that the same of you to us. Please do not use swear words or language that is profane, whereas sometimes in the audience we have children and youth, and we ask for everyone to practice in public a respectful way of getting your message across. We'll hear as many speakers as we can in the 30 minutes, and we will hold to 30 minutes to keep things moving forward. I ask that the speaker who is next in line come forward and wait for the near the lectern, and I apologize in advance if I pronounce anyone's name incorrectly. Later, we will have board comments at the end of our board meeting, and board members are also limited to 3 minutes. Finally, other than thanking each member of the public for speaking to the board, during the public comment, the board does not respond directly to the comments or the questions made during this public comment. Please do not take this as an indication of our interest or level of compassion for what you're saying. I can assure you that we all take comments seriously and oftentimes wish that we could respond directly to all public comments, but then we would be here indefinitely. Board members can, if they choose, respond to the public comments during their board comment time, which are scheduled to occur after the committee comments. Our superintendent staff also take note and oftentimes will follow up with a speaker. Board members also, as you've noticed, have computers and oftentimes during public comment are typing and taking notes to follow up with the superintendent and our staff regarding the raised concerns of our public. We take very seriously the community has made the time to come out to the board meeting instead of being home with your family. We'll now hear from our Ms. Valerie Trahan and Mr. Ralph Walker.
Would Valerie come? She's not here, so just Ralph.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Trahan doesn't seem to be present.
Hello. First of all, let me tell y'all one thing. Please do this for me. Tell all your workers to do not speak to me because I'm going to cuss them out the next time Susan Craig or any one of them speak to me again. Okay? I don't want none of y'all. I'm not cool with y'all. I'm not two-faced. So I don't smile in your face and think everything is cool. So don't speak to me, none of y'all. All right? If you see me on the streets or whatever, especially you, Susan Craig, don't smile at me and speak to me. I met with you. I filed a complaint with you September the 2nd. You never responded. I came to you, Donald. What didn't you do? You lied and said you were going to talk to Lynette about it. You ain't did nothing. Won't you resign, dude? Won't you do everybody a favor and resign? You are worthless, dude. You're a worthless, weak brother. Man, that's it. But don't speak to me. None of y'all. Don't speak to me. The only one I'm cool with is Pat Sadler. The only one. The rest of y'all don't know. I'm going to cuss you out. You speak to me again, I'll make a scene. Don't ever speak to me. I'm not cool with y'all. I'm not going to smile in your face and act like it's cool. Do not speak to me. Y'all worthless. I ain't doing nothing for these kids. Nothing. Donald, you need to resign. Go on and resign and quit stealing all that, $250,000 a year of money you get from this. And Karen, you signed that contract. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. You signed that contract for this man to steal that money. Won't you resign down and do everybody a favor because you know you're on your way out. All right? Don't speak to me. Don't speak to me. I'm going to cuss you out. I'm going to cuss you out. I'm going to call you all kind of names, so don't speak to me. None of y'all. None of y'all. Don't speak to me when you see me. Don't speak to me. I'm going to cuss you out.
Keith Carlisle and Mansour Aydin.
Donald, when are you going to respond to my complaint? About Susan Craig not responding to my complaint? Huh?
Good evening. My name is Keith Carlisle, and I'm a resident here in the city of Berkeley. I live at 1903 Ward Street, behind the alternative school on Martin Luther King, and I believe that's Oregon. And I'm calling on you guys because I've requested several times that the dumpster be moved that's directly next door to my apartment, and I've requested several times that the lot be kept up that's on the corner there directly next to my apartment. So at this point, rodents are tunneling and burrowing under the wall and into my backyard, and I'm quite upset about it, and I hope that they don't start to enter my apartment, and I'm planning to bring a lawsuit against you guys because it doesn't seem that, you want to address this in the proper way. I've spoken to Mr. Copeland about this on several occasions. I've spoken to Ms. Hemphill about this as well. And, I came to you guys initially asking could I take control of that particular lot that's being unkept by the Berkeley Unified School District so that I could just plant flowers there to just beautify it and have proper stewardship of that property. But again, I spoke to Ms. Pell about that. I went to her office. I'm into her meeting space at the Mocha coffee shop one Saturday evening, and I was given plants. I brought pictures of those plants to you guys and produced that and introduced that to you, showed that to you guys. But still, nothing's happening, and so I have no choice but to come and just let you know that I don't plan to leave Berkeley, and it costs a lot to live in Berkeley. I'm a disabled veteran, and I'm going to need a lot of money from you guys to move somewhere else because, I'm not going to be able to live with rats. That's just not proper. And, the apartments that I live in have been there well before the school was built. And upon speaking to Mr. Copeland, it was my understanding that the dumpster was going to be moved. But then he came back and said that there was some issue with the employees of the school district, the custodians, transporting the garbage to the other dumpster that's located on the side of the school that's directly across from the baseball field there. So I don't see why, the garbage can't be transported to that particular dumpster. And also, I'm wondering why the dumpster is left open. The lid is up on the dumpster 24/7, and so the rodents can smell the food stuff, and they just come, I have pictures on my phone here if any of you care to see them, but the rodents are like 6 or 7 pound rodents, like the size of small kittens, So it's really a problem. And so someone came and cut the grass down yesterday. The grass was like knee high in the lot for the last 3 or 4 weeks after the rain subsided, and I expected that somebody would have cut it well before that, but I suspect that it might have been my landlord because I would think that the school district would do a better job of containing that if they were the ones that did it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Dean? Oh. I'm sorry.
Good evening. On the behalf of the Berkeley NAACP, I'm here tonight to discuss and seek resolutions to major employment-related matters. Based on information provided to the Berkeley NAACP, HR staff have failed to provide due process and to protect employment rights of a number of both classified and certified employees. A case in point, in our opinion, the HR staff have acted in an impish, frivolous, and callous way when dealing with serious matters related to African American employees' economic security. We are concerned that management staff in HR are engaging in a form of ethnic cleansing of African American employees from the USD. This is particularly true when it comes to African American classified employees. More specifically, the Berkeley Unified School District has an employee whom has worked for BUSD for over 25 years. She sustained injuries that were deemed 100% work-related. She received a release from her doctor, allowing her to return to work with conditions. Although her job, as well as 2 additional jobs were in her field was available, she was denied placement. She was forced to exhaust all of her accumulated leave and consequently placed on a 39-month reemployment list. This process used by HR almost exclusively against African American long-term employees is wrong, and it must be investigated. There appear to be no transparency nor accountability. I have a list of 12 additional employees that had the same fate. I'm here tonight to ask the board and the superintendent to investigate these issues of placing hardworking employees on 39-month reemployment. This interrupts their financial life. You have folks that are coming to our office in distress. about their economic and financial livelihood as it relates to working for this district. It seemed to be a system that's designed to force people out of employment. It's your responsibility to examine these issues. If I have names of over 12 people here that's all been either suspended or lost their employment with BUSD. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. So now we'll hear from our unions, our union reps, and committees. Afterwards, our committees. We have one committee minute.
Union, who's first? Unions or
Kathy,
committees?
union. That's first. And then-
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Evans. My name is Kathy Campbell, and I'm the president of the Berkeley Federation of Teachers. I want to speak with you tonight about the critical issue of our teacher hiring timeline in BUSD. We believe that there is nothing more important to our ability to serve the students and families of Berkeley than having schools that are fully staffed with excellent teachers on day one of the school year. Retaining our very skilled instructors and being able to recruit fabulous, talented, highly skilled new employees should be, and we believe is, a top priority for this board and for staff. In addition, as you have heard over and over again this year from the community, and repeatedly in past years from teachers and parents, we must increase our efforts and change some of our basic timelines in order to recruit more teachers of color in BUSD. We are now at the critical time of the year when these goals must become concrete actions. The prime hiring season for teachers is quickly upon us. BUSD must take steps to seize the opportunities before us. We believe that this is the year to significantly move up our hiring timeline. As you know, all of the first-year teachers in BUSD have received a letter telling them that they are released from BUSD employment as of June 17th, 2016. I hope you knew that. In past years, these teachers have not been rehired until early June. The email to these teachers last year telling them to come in and sign a new contract was delivered on June 5th, 2015. New teachers cannot generally receive an actual contract until after the temp teachers have been rehired, meaning that this also has not started in earnest until May or very often June in past years. As you know, we are now living in a period of an extremely tight labor market for teachers. BUSD must change its timelines, or we risk both not starting school fully staffed and not having the opportunity to hire the most qualified candidates. For the first time in at least 10 years, in my knowledge, BUSD did not start out this current school year fully staffed. This causes harm to students and makes the start of school more stressful and less smooth for all. This is the year to seize this opportunity because we do not need to wait for the May revise in making hiring decisions and in starting our process. If anything, the budget will get better in the May revise. It is clear it is not going to get worse. We need to seize the day. We very much appreciate staff highlighting this issue in the LCAP document you have before you tonight. And the hard work, we also appreciate the hard work that staff has done to bring you this document and the budget priorities, which you voted on in March, which is like historic. That was hard work. That's hard work by the staff, and we really appreciate that. As staff writes in their document before you tonight, the purpose of examining the 16-17 expenditures separately is in an effort to expedite direction that will impact some hiring timelines for 16-17. These are the steps, and I am going to email this to you tomorrow, but here are the steps we think the board can provide direction on in order to move up the BUSD hiring timeline. 1, we urge you to give your blessing to the not new, couldn't think of a better word, old, right? To the not new LCAP funded positions that are being presented to you tonight. That is number 1. That is number 1. If you can do that, it will greatly facilitate this effort. 2, we urge the board to encourage staff to begin the hiring process without waiting for the May revise. Fundamental, critical. 3, we urge staff to take steps so that the site plans are not an impediment to expediting the hiring process. They should be due right about now anyways. So 4, we urge the board to vote on new, so not old, new LCAP-funded positions as early as possible. It would be ideal for the board to vote on as many of these positions as possible at the May 4th meeting. On a somewhat related note, really quickly, we want to say that we're very supportive of the proposal, two proposals in the document before you. I'll wrap up really fast. 1, the full-time restorative practices positions that are BUSD employees, very supportive. 2, the item that is about beginning to address the proportionality of staffing. There's an item before you that addresses Malcolm X. It's a somewhat larger problem, but we're glad to see it being addressed through LCAP funds, which we think is a good way to go in addressing that challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll hear from our committees, and we have Bruce Simon from BSEP and P&O.
Good evening, members of the board, superintendent, district staff. My name is Bruce Simon, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the BSEP Planning and Oversight Committee. First, tonight, I'd like to congratulate you on your outstanding fiscal stewardship of the district and the recent news that the district has received a 2-step upgrade in its credit rating from AA- to AA+. This is wonderful and welcome news. It will benefit the taxpayers as their investments in the district will stretch further, so that's fantastic. It's also important recognition from an outside agency of the strength of the district's fiscal stewardship and stability. So tonight you're going to be hearing an update from the BSEP director, Natasha Beery, on the ongoing planning process for the upcoming BSEP measure renewal. The board first heard a presentation in April of 2003 about the early components of a planning process, and the BSEP P&O committee made a statement at that time expressing the need to ensure that there would be a focus in 3 areas: on budget, on program, on community engagement to ensure the best outcome. In 2014, the superintendent's BSEP measure planning work group, which included the P&O chairs, began to provide the initial planning framework, including establishing a timeline for the planning process, reviewing the prior BSEP planning records, examining the trajectory of the current BSEP funds, and identifying key issues to be addressed. The board and the P&O have received several updates as the work has progressed. About a year ago, the planning process developed 3 formal components: educational priorities, budget models, and public engagement. The board has heard reports in each of these areas, and the P&O committee has also been engaged in these 3 areas. They have heard reports from staff and also advised the BSEP director on the design of an effective and inclusive community engagement process to ensure public understanding and support of the current measure and provide opportunities for input into the new measure. Beginning last fall, there have been multiple workshops, focus groups, and community conversations across the district with members of the P&O present at every event, often acting as table leaders and facilitators to ensure that the public has access to information about BSEP and also to record the questions, concerns, and suggestions that arose at each discussion. You'll be hearing an initial summary of some of those conversations this evening, along with highlights from the voter poll included in the planning process. We believe that the combination of staff discussions on program and budget issues, together with input from the voter polls, stakeholder groups, and community conversations, will provide a sound footing for the draft of the new measure, which the board will review on April 20th, right around the corner. We want to thank the board, the superintendent, the members of the district, and school site staff, along with many community members who have volunteered their time to ensure that the community engagement component has been well supported. Support for the BSEP measure depends on the trust of the community in the oversight of the P&O committee and the open public process that invites all voices to participate in planning and oversight. We believe that public understanding of the issues in school programs and school funding has been increased through this process. We also welcome public comment on BSEP at our planning and oversight meetings. Our next meeting is April 12th, 2016 at 7:15 in room 126 of the district building at 2020 Bonar, right next door. Thank you for your time.
So now we'll hear comments from the board and the superintendent. This time we'll hold to 3 minutes, and we'll begin with the superintendent.
So, good evening, everyone. I, too, want to thank the LCAP committee. Pat Sadler, I want to thank you personally for all the hard work and your leadership in bringing our expenditures and programs and things that we want to support and things that we are recommending early. This is something we had talked about last year and doing, and thank you so much for meeting with the PAC, which is our Parent Advisory Council, as well as our Education Advisory Council that has been meeting regularly. And so I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank our P&O under the leadership of Natasha Berry for all the hard work and hours that you've put in, and the chairs of the P&O and the P&O members for all the planning, and I watch you twirl your hair and so forth, and when you're nervous, and so I just want to acknowledge you too, and for everything and the hard work that you've done in bringing this to us. And you're going to hear about where we are in terms of the planning, what we need to do. You're going to hear from her tonight. I also want to talk about, and you've heard this earlier, about our credit rating being upgraded 2 levels by Standards & Poor, from a AA- to a AA+, and that was based on our tax growth and our performance. And by Fitch Ratings, they gave us a AAA rating based on our tax growth. And I just want to say, in our operations, and I cannot thank Javetta Cleveland, who is our deputy superintendent, for her leadership in all of this, as well as Natasha Berry and Tim White and their presentations. It made a big difference in our credit rating, and this means so much to us. And I don't think the community knows how much money this could possibly save our taxpayers, but it's well over $2 million. So this is a big deal, and this is something that we need to get excited about, and I'm so thankful for the team. So I think that we need to give them another round of applause. So thank you.
Director Pell?
Good evening. I get to do one of my favorite things tonight, which is to make an appointment. So one of the things that we get to do as board members is to appoint some of our representatives to different commissions, and one of those commissions is the Youth Commission, and the Youth Commission identifies the needs of youth, reviews and recommends youth services and programs for the city. And tonight I am going to appoint Ruby Spies. And Ruby, can you stand up? I think you're here probably with the people on either side are probably your parents, I'm guessing. Ruby is a sophomore at Berkeley High School and is a leader in the community. I'm just going to read what she said in her application. Ruby is currently the co-president of Berkeley High's Gender and Sexuality Alliance, a board member of the Bay Area Youth Summit, and a member of Berkeley High's school redesign team. She's passionate and dedicated to activism and has many ideas about how Berkeley can better serve our youth. So I'm really excited to work with you, Ruby, and to have you represent me on the Youth Commission, so congratulations. And I also want to really encourage other youth. We have a bunch of openings on behalf of their board appointees that we still have open. The Youth Commission is open to students or youth from ages 12 to 25 and has to be made up of at least half middle school and high school students. So please, if you're interested and you're out there, the application is on the City Berkeley website under commissions. So we really look forward to hearing from more of you so you can get involved. My office hours are Saturday, April 16th at Mojo from 10 to 12. Thanks.
Directors? Any comments? Director Daniels?
All right. Office hours, because of work scheduling and Passover and a few other things, I'm not able to have office hours in April, so I'll look to May. A couple of dates coming up. On April 9th, this Saturday at 5:30 at the Ed Roberts campus, the first of a number of events celebrating Willard's centennial are coming. So this Saturday is the gala/auction. And if you somehow happen to go to that other junior high in Berkeley Unified School District, well, we feel bad for you. Another event is next Thursday, April 14th. It's the Smarter Balanced Assessment Family Night. It's in this room at 6:30. I encourage you guys to come with your families to learn about that. The Berkeley High Alumni Game, it's the annual game where us old folks pretend like we know how to play baseball against the young folks from Berkeley High's baseball team. That will happen on Saturday, April 23rd at 2 p.m. Berkeley High voted, and Petra Silva Kovanis, I think is her name. She is our new school board rep from Berkeley High, so we're going to welcome her. And then lastly, we can't talk enough about this credit rating. I think it's hard to overstate how special and unique what just happened was. Basically, this is the risk that we are assigned for investors to give us money to build our schools. And the lower the risk, the lower interest rate we have to pay. So that obviously saves, as the superintendent mentioned, millions and millions of dollars over the course of every substantial bond we issue, and it will carry us forward into any future bonds we have. So there's a scale. AAA, which we received from one of the agencies, is the best. We got that. AA plus is the second best. We've got that from another agency. To compare, all of the large school districts, LA, San Diego, they all have AAA ratings because there's no doubt that they can pay back their bonds. So we, as a small 9,000-10,000 school district, are now seen as equivalent risk or low risk to these large, multi-billion-dollar budget entities. Beverly Hills Unified, everyone talks about how wealthy Beverly Hills is. They have a AA plus. So we are the same as Beverly Hills or better. So take that. And then I just would like to quote a little bit from the report about our fiscal management. Quote, "The district with a moderate fixed cost burden has demonstrated a solid ability to manage spending at times of economic and revenue decline." Quote, "The combination of the district's expenditure cutting flexibility and solid revenue funding levels leave it well positioned to address cyclical downturns. The district has strong budget management and a demonstrated commitment to bolstering its financial cushion as needed at times of economic recovery." So, well done.
Director Hempel, Alper?
For those of you who may have been trying to reach me for the past week or so, I have been out of town visiting my grandchildren in New Orleans. I've been going to more soccer games than I ever have been to in my life, as they were in a soccer tournament, so Grandma and Grandpa went to support them. But I'm back now. My office hours this month will be April 30th. This is a fifth Saturday month, so it'll be Saturday, April 30th. My office hours are always the last Saturday of the month at 10:30 at Cafe Lila. I also want to let everyone know that the Anti-Racism Task Force will be meeting for the first time tomorrow from 6 to 7 p.m., and that will be here at 2020 Bonar in room 126. So it is open to the public. There is a fixed task force, but that doesn't mean if you're interested in the subject that you can't come and sit in. So since I have been gone, I don't have a whole lot more to say. A lot of things are happening, and I know I will have a lot more to say at the next meeting, because I think next week I have a pretty packed schedule of things that I'll be doing.
It's so nice to have a retired board member on the board. Director Albert, you pass?
I'm good.
Okay. I want to thank Director Daniels for your snapshot on what it means to get our rating. I think that's probably the snapshot we should use in our A+ news. That would help people understand, break it down. You do so well at that. So thank you very much for doing that. I also wanted to follow up on a public comment of our last board meeting when we had a member here from the public ask us why this room did not have an AED in our defibrillator in our boardroom. And I'd like us to see if we can explore the possibility of having purchased an AED, given this building is being now well used. And I think it serves a purpose. And so I don't know who, perhaps Mr. White, our Director of Facilities, can look into it. And then, of course, it's the training behind it. Somebody who's here has to have the training. So I'd like to see where's that possibility that we can encourage that, given the public use of the facility. Last week, I went to Sacramento to a Latino Summit hosted by the Latino Community Foundation. It's an advocacy group that also helps to bring light to the issues affecting both Latino and a broad spectrum of students of color. And we went to legislators' offices to advocate for specific things that we put at the top of the list, one being education, the other being the climate change. And so I had an opportunity to visit Tony Thurman along other 4 members that came. There was over 250 people from all over California that came to talk to our legislators and elected. I got to speak to a Republican for the first time. So I talked about the importance of climate change in our next generation science standards, and that was really good. That was an opportunity. Talked about also the living wage ordinance, and also about the next generation science standards. And also talked about ethnic studies, because the governor, although it was approved by both Assembly and Senate to have ethnic studies as a requirement in the state of California, the governor did not sign. It's going to come forward again. Although Berkeley has it in our requirements, we only have it for a semester. So it's hopeful that one day we can go for a full year. Obviously, all students need to know about how ethnic studies and identity and culture matters to our students. And so that was my week last week. So now we'll continue with our board agenda, and we're going to now approve for the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the note of removing we're not going to do the action item?
No.
Well, that's just consent, doesn't
Go
have...
with the consent calendar.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we will go to our first item, which is our local control accountability plan.
So, thank you. So, while the board actually knows all about the local control and accountability plan, there are folks out there that don't know what that is. So this is our plan that is mandated by the state as a standardized vehicle for addressing our state priorities and our local goals. And what we're doing is identifying the most effective actions and services to meet those goals, as well as account for the LCFF supplemental expenditures and the indicators for monitoring progress. And so the plan really addresses how we will meet our high-need students, and we've labeled our high-need students as our low-income English learners, foster youth, and we also, in our plan, look at students with disabilities, and by ethnicity, we look at our Latino students and our African-American students. So this is actually the first draft of the LCAP for 16-17 that is being presented to the board tonight, which includes the program actions and our service recommendations. And all of these recommendations have been presented to the PAC, which is our Parent Advisory Council, and our EAC, which is our Educators Advisory Council, and it's also gone through our Ed Service team. So the purpose of bringing this to the board early is so that, as you heard from our union president, teachers union president, BFT, is that we wanted to bring these expenditures separately in an effort to expedite direction that will have some impact on our hiring timelines for 16-17. One of the things that's different in our plan that you will not see in many of the other plans is that while we are bringing recommendations, we're also eliminating one program according to our policy. And this allows us to really examine all of our programs and resources so that we are ensuring the best programs that will meet the needs of our students. So our local control accountability plan is really consolidates 5 strategic district goals into 3 LCAP goals. And the first is to provide a high-quality classroom instruction and curriculum that promotes college and career readiness with academic interventions in place to eliminate barriers to student success. Goal 2 is to end the racial predictability of academic achievement by ensuring that all students are culturally and linguistically responsive to the needs of our students. And 3, ensure all school sites have safe, welcoming, and inclusive climates for all of our students and families so that all of our students are ready to learn. So staff is asking, as you are looking at these recommendations, to really look at it through these 3 questions. Do the proposed focus goals reflect the district's priorities for services for all students as well as eligible students and subgroups? And do the proposed programs, actions, and services benefit our low-income students, English learners, and foster youth, commensurate with the projected $5 million in supplemental funding? And 3, are there any allocations of supplemental funds that cause the board any concerns? And so I have Ms. Sadler, as well as Ms. Riddle here, to really address the board and provide a brief presentation on our expenditures and programs.
So thank you, Dr. Evans, and good evening, board members. We're excited to come and present our staff recommendations. This is our preliminary version of the LCAP for 2016-17, and then eventually when we come back to you, we will present 17-18 and 18-19. I just want to remind you that we currently have a 3-year LCAP plan in which we are in year 1, and the next 2 years have already been approved in the document that we approved last June. And we will be making slight recommendations for some shifts, but primarily we want to continue to move forward with what's already been approved. Additionally, there's going to be a new LCAP rubric that's being designed at the state level. I've had a chance to see a preview of it a couple of weeks ago, and the state is going to give us more direction on the actual accountability items, the data pieces that the state is going to require us to review, as well as a new template. So last year the template changed twice. This year they told us we were going to upload it into an e-template on the CDE website. At the meeting 2 weeks ago, we were told, don't worry about that because it's going to change completely in the fall once the state school board makes their final approval. And it will be more aligned with the ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the new federal act that takes the place of the NCLB. So there's a lot of changes to come. So the purpose of the presentation this evening will be to provide data and some background that we used looking at site enrollment as well as the number of unduplicated students at the school site. I have sent all of you a folder that has additional supporting documents, and once we're finished, I hope you'll be able to pull it up. It might help you as you formulate your questions for us this evening. We also hope to revisit the services that are already approved in the 16-17 LCAP plan that's been approved not only by you but also at the county and state level. And finally, we look forward to your feedback as we create the final recommendations that we will bring back to you at April 20th as we do a board study session. So the critical questions, Dr. Evans reviewed them with you, but I'd like to review them one last time. Does LCAP or do LCAP goals continue to reflect the district and the board's priorities? Do the proposed actions and services benefit the academic and social emotional needs of the targeted students? Are there any proposed additions, increases, or changes that we'll be sharing with you this evening that concern you, or if you have questions about them, we hope to be able to answer them. So last year, we were the first district in the state to adopt a board policy for LCAP, Policy 0460. In Section 6, it has some very important information about this process. It directed us to create a comprehensive timeline for approval, and the timeline was attached to the board doc, but I also sent you a copy of it. It also says that we have to ensure all drafts are shared with all stakeholders and the public. The third thing, which is an important item, the superintendent shall make a recommendation to not continue at least one action or service that we are currently implementing this year. And the last thing is that no later than the first board meeting in May, the board will be provided with a draft of LCAP as well as an executive summary, and the board doc explicitly says that will both be translated in Spanish. So after looking at the data, and Debbie did an amazing job with the mid-year data evaluation, Dr. Evans has recommended that we make a change to the middle school bridge program. And his recommendation, as well as Ed Services, would be to reduce the bridge program from a 0.6 FTE at each of the middle schools to a 0.2 FTE, which would focus on the students coming from 5th grade to 6th grade. This FTE would support these students as they make the transition, connect with the families, as well as provide some level of case management, meeting with the students frequently, either during the school day or after school. And Ed Services would like to shift the funding so that we could create more of a restorative practice model at the middle schools. And we're going to be recommending that we create a position, a 1.0 counseling position at each of the middle schools. This person would do restorative practices, workshops, training, work with the students, work with the families, as well as case management of students that have been pre-identified as needing additional support at the school, and primarily would be our targeted students that we use our LCAP supplemental funding for. So this is the enrollment data that we've looked at. We looked at 2 years of the CalPADS information. We looked at the differences, which schools increased as far as student enrollment, which schools declined. We also looked at the percentages of unduplicated students and the actual number of unduplicated students at each of the school sites. You can see highlighted in yellow that at Jefferson, Emerson, as well as Oxford, is interesting, they had the same increase of 13 students. And then if you look at the middle schools, and you have this document if you need to pull it up and look at it more in detail, I emailed it to you. You can see that only at Martin Luther King was there a pretty significant increase as far as numbers of students unduplicated. They had plus 23. So the projected budget, currently we are operating with a budget of $4.2 million, a little bit more. These numbers for 16-17 and 17-18 are projected numbers based on the January governor's budget, where we expect that there will be some increase or decrease after the May revise, and we'll update you as we move forward with the LCAP process. So under Goal 1 again provides high quality classroom instruction that promotes college and career readiness. These are the things that we're currently funding. We have RTI2 teachers, we have 9.0 FTE, we have math coaches, we have 2.6 FTE. We have a BHS intervention counselor. There's a star there because we're recommending to increase from 1 counselor to 2 counselors. We have .2 FTE at all of our K-5 schools for Lit Coach. We have money for AVID professional development for the college students who are tutors, for the teacher hourly, for the teachers, they work above and beyond their workday in order to implement AVID. We have middle school bridge as well as high school bridge. We're recommending a .6 at the middle school level, which is a .2 at each site, as well as an increase from 1.2 to 1.4 with the high school bridge program. We have the superintendent super science program. Currently, we're serving 300 students. We're at 3 sites this year. We're at Thousand Oaks, we're at Rosa Parks, we're at Malcolm X. And in the plan, there was an allocation of $215,000 for extended day academic intervention. And we have a recommendation for that. What we did is we looked at the total number of unduplicated students, and we divided 215 by that. And we are recommending that we give each of the sites an allocation so that they can create an academic intervention program after school for the targeted students. Here's a picture from Super Science Saturday. The Lawrence Hall of Science was there. This was at Malcolm X School. Goal 2 is to ensure that all systems are culturally and linguistically responsive to student needs. And so there are 3 expenditures under that: recruitment and retention of teachers of color. There's the ELD teachers. Across the district, we have 9.8 FTE, and then $40,000 for the PLC training for the principals and teams from each of the schools. There's a picture of ELD instruction. That was from our middle school summer program. We had more students than we could actually service in the summer program. There was a real excitement about participating in the 19-day program. And so goal 3 is to ensure safe and welcoming schools. That should say that have positive school cultures. And so this is a big one. And I know last year there was a big push to really invest in restorative practices. And so we are committed to that. Our recommendation is to increase the coordination of school-based services from a 0.6 FTE to a 1.0. We're making a recommendation for behavioral health services at our TK through 5 schools as well as BTA. Currently, we give each site $9,000, and our recommendation is to increase it to $12,000. Bay Area Peacekeepers, Dr. Craig says that the students have responded really well to this intervention program. Currently, we give Berkeley High School $50,000 for restorative practices. We have a pilot program at Washington that we'd like to recommend continuing, and restorative practices currently at BTA, and the RC is restorative conferencing. That's not exactly the investment that we're currently using, but that's about as far as the money would go as we plan for next year. And then our site family engagement folks, we dually fund that with BSEP, and so this is half of the overall family engagement model. So we've had a lot of conversations about this particular goal, goal 3. And so we put together this graphic today because maybe it will kind of help to make sense for visual learners. So we know that we need someone at the helm of this work, someone that's going to coordinate not only the behavioral health services, but also the restorative practices. We want to recommend that we add another elementary site for a pilot. We're talking about investing in 3 counselors. The reason why we chose counselors is because they can supervise interns, and if we could build the capacity in a counselor and a group of interns, how amazing would that be for each of our middle schools? We want to continue to support the restorative practices at the high school and at BTA. The Berkeley Bay Area Peacekeepers intersects with that work. We have a big mental health grant. It's about $300,000 that will provide PD for people in our community, parents, as well as district staff. And then out there to the left, we have the behaviorist, and that's a big district investment, about $500,000. It's a different color because it's not funded out of LCAP supplemental. But the Ed Services team is really committed to that intersection there you see that's in the dark color. We feel that we really need to pull together a team and create a PD model that would incorporate restorative practices, toolbox, PBIS, so that we can better serve our students and not have duplicating efforts. And so that's work that we hope to take on this summer. There's someone using their tools. And there's some additional expenses in order to maintain LCAP. We have a percentage for evaluation. We have a percentage for contingency. We have the indirect reserve. We had about $57,000 that we hadn't quite allocated, and I didn't want to change it because we hadn't done it when I did the board doc last week, but we're thinking that that could be used for the elementary pilot, as well as to invest in training of the new RJ or RP counselors at the middle school. So what we're recommending as increased services, these are things we're already funding, but we would like to increase. We'd like to increase the coordination of behavior health services from 0.6 to 1.0. The site allocation for behavior health services from $9,000 to $12,000. And remember, we get $5,000 from the city of Berkeley, so that would give each site a pretty decent amount of money to really invest in a strong partnership with one of our local agencies. An intervention counselor at Berkeley High School, we're recommending to go from 1.0 to 2.0. A proportional increase in RTI2 for Malcolm X. And then we have the extended day academic intervention that's in the plan for what is called year 3. And then the proposed new services, restorative practices counselor for middle school 1.0 for each of the schools, a TSA for equity and instruction, a 0.5, a person that can work with our equity teacher leaders, that can work on reviewing our curriculum and ensuring that our practices are culturally responsive for our students. We've had discussion about that position. It could be a one-time position, a one-year position, but I think there's a real need, and based on the town hall meeting that happened in December, I really feel like that it is an issue and that this would be a good service for our district. And finally, there's a recommendation to do a literacy pre-teach summer academy, which would take place for 2 weeks in August. It would be for those students that are currently in grades kindergarten 1 and 2 who in the school year are not reading at grade level. We'd like to invite them in for some intensive literacy support work, as well as doing some introduction to the skills that they'll be instructed by in the fall. And these are a few of the challenges that we see with LCAP. There's negotiated employee raises. Again, trying to find the right folks for these jobs. For 2 years, we tried to find someone to lead RTI2, and we weren't lucky. We weren't lucky finding a TSA for recruitment. We found an amazing consultant, but we'd like to post those positions as soon as possible so that we can try to find the best fits. And then if we agree on the TSA for equity as well. And then a need for authorization for posting once these positions have been vetted by the stakeholders, and coordination of school-based services. Should it be a counselor on special assignment? Should that position be elevated to some type of manager? And then finally, I think we're all really committed to making sure that the money that we're spending hits the targeted students, and that the intervention that happens after school in ELA and math is aligned with our Common Core standards, but also will be effective in outcome for the targeted students. Here's the timeline. You've seen this before for approval. It's based on the board policy. I wanted to highlight the comments, the community comments. The comments will be accepted via email until 5 o'clock on May 16th. And Dr. Evans has the task of responding by June 6th. And the PAC said we weren't timely in our response last year, so we're going to do everything we can this year to be much more timely. And finally, if you're interested in the data points that the state is looking at incorporating in the new LCAP rubric, these are the 2 sites that the state has set up. Really interesting. There's about 25 data points in eddata.org by district. Take some time and take a look at it. And that's it.
Can we actually go back to the questions? So we have about 21 minutes, and so I kind of want to stick to the questions as they relate to the services and recommendations that we are asking the board to weigh in on. So the first question that we wanted the board to be able to respond to is, are we continuing to, are the goals that we have for LCAP reflecting our priorities? So I think we, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I want to interrupt and just say I believe that there's two items on this LCAP plan that I think I need to recuse myself from either discussing, and that's the after-school, the intervention for programs. What is it? I'm sorry, I didn't get it. And then the literacy pre-teach, because I run an
extended day.
after-school program. So those are two items that, you know, I might have students who participate, or might have students that would be that would benefit from the program services. So I will have to recuse myself from that discussion.
You do.
So
are there any questions? Thank you, Director Leva Cutler. Are there any questions around, one, I think we've done, staff, and we've done a pretty good job around keeping true to our priorities as they reflect our goals. The second bullet point, do the proposed actions and services benefit the academic, social, and emotional needs of the targeted students? So as you're looking at what we're recommending, are there any actions that you might have some concerns? Restorative justice, any of the actions?
Are we doing each question at a time, or?
I'm just, yes, sticking to the question so we can just kind of make sure.
Yeah, I mean, I assume I know I have some
Okay, so
about
let's
some of the
start with those.
specific ones, but I don't want to jump ahead since we didn't answer question one, so.
So,
do the proposed focus goal, do the goals reflect the district's priorities for services for all our students, as well as the eligible students and subgroups, right?
I thought everybody just nodded their head, so I assumed that
Oh,
was
sorry,
yes.
Superintendent.
So go ahead.
So we're going to the
Yep.
second question?
Yes, so we were going to
Okay.
the second question. I thought everybody nodded their head, so I went to the second question.
Just as a suggestion, Madam President, that we discuss everything but those things that,
Well, you all can discuss, but I'm not going to.
yeah, but you have to actually leave.
Yeah.
So why don't we discuss those that you can discuss, and then
Then
at that point, you can step out. Because you could be sending us, messages that,
I'll send them out.
So I just want to
Score
briefly
warrior.
say, I know this isn't part of the question, but this was a fantastic presentation. I thought it was concise. It was clear in terms of what we're funding beyond the base, what we're funding beyond what was in the existing plan that we approved back in June. I thought that the questions and the intro really laid out what we are being asked to respond to as a board. So it's very helpful for me as a board member to have it presented in this way. I really appreciate the adherence to the policy that was worked very hard on last year. And just want to be clear to the thousands who are watching, the idea that we're here at this point at the beginning of April and that there will be a draft in May requires a tremendous amount of work. And if you look at what other districts are doing, we are leaps and bounds ahead of where they're at, and we're actually benefiting from it. So we can have, calm, collected, intelligent conversations without a lot of yelling and shouting and accusations of bad process. We can talk about the fact that we can go out early to get, top people for these positions. And we actually wrote that ability into our policy. So it's very helpful. Okay, and also just to recognize how difficult it is to recommend discontinuing a program that are serving students. And so I don't know of any district that is actively sort of discontinuing supplementally funded programs around. I'm sure there are some, but I don't know of any at this point. So I just want to acknowledge that too. The three things that I have concerns about are, one, the using supplemental funds to fund the proportional RTI to address increasing enrollment, and then the expanding the elementary pilot via seeds. I think that, in a perfect world we could, but if we have limited funds, which we do, trying to create cultural shifts at our middle and our high school around discipline and behavior is really where I think we want to invest significantly. And since I think there's still a need, there's more funding to do that needed at the middle and at the high schools, that we're not ready yet to to go down to the elementary schools or to expand that pilot. And then just not a problem with the equity instructional TSA, but just to be clear that it's one-time funds and not an ongoing fund. We may decide later on that it's a worthwhile thing to fund on an ongoing basis, but my understanding is that is a one-time allocation for purposes of our ask today. That was the question you asked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I spoke with the superintendent and Director Sadler about this, but just would like to throw out, and at some point we can discuss, doesn't have to be today, the idea of some sort of revolving loan fund that would pay the tuition costs of a classified employee getting a certificate to then come back into the district and teach. And you could figure it out so that if you're teaching in the district, you have zero interest, so we incentivize it and stuff like that. But I think it's, the state is trying to do that at the statewide level. I think they're going to face some challenges with this governor. And I do think it's something that is within reason in terms of cost and could produce long-term impacts in a positive way, getting our employees who know our kids, who know our district, to support them in becoming certificated teachers and coming back into the district to work with our students.
So can we address that last statement under the third bullet? Are there any proposed additions? Because that would be an addition.
Thank you, Superintendent. Yep.
So can staff, you want to address why we chose the pilot adding the pilot as opposed to adding additional resources at the middle school or high school level? Because we did add resources to those two levels.
Can you also address how the students who are currently in the pipeline are going to be served after this program no longer continues?
Yeah, so the first question right now, we have a pilot at the elementary level at Washington, and we're proposing an additional pilot at another school. And the reason why we believe that this is important to us, could you explain that to the board members? The reason why we are recommending this?
Yes, so we've seen success in the pilot at Washington School to the extent that the PTA at Washington has actually funded a second restorative justice practitioner there. They're really utilizing that quite a bit, and it's making a difference in terms of the school's culture, the support for the students, and also the staff. So it's, we believe, and as services, I think we'd really like to see restorative practices at all of our schools throughout the district. It's, I think, ideal to have someone full-time at every single school. So this was sort of our proposal in terms of in a way of increasing the support. But Director Daniels, your proposal to divert those funds to increase support at the secondary level is also certainly something that we would support.
And this is actually a draft, and one of the things that we have been working on, and I want to thank our Restorative Justice Advisory Committee because they are actually developing a roadmap. And even though this is just a draft, we will be looking at what they're presenting, and hopefully we can make sure that we incorporate that into this, because we want to be in alignment and all on the same page as well. So that we might come back with something a little different than this, because this is our first draft, or take it this.
Well, I would just add on to that, the principal at Washington is incredibly enthusiastic about the program, and that it is making a huge difference for kids. And even though we need the support at all levels, starting off with our youngest kids and teaching them a different way of dealing with conflict and working with the staff and the community on restorative practices is making a huge difference at that school. And again, they are so enthusiastic about it that we think it is a good proposal to bring that pilot to another elementary school and build a collaborative relationship between the two, so we can learn about that at the youngest grade levels.
Are there any?
I do share Director Daniels' concerns about, I think with the best of intentions, we sometimes spread ourselves too thin. And so something that's good gets diluted and doesn't have the impact as if we were a little bit more laser focused and putting more resources in one place. And so, you know, we have 11 schools, and if we go one by one, it's going to be 11 years before we go district-wide, while we have 3 middle schools and 1 high school. So I almost think that, you know, while usually you do want to go from youngest to oldest, you know, we do have things like Toolbox and some of those other behavioral support initiatives that are, I would say, related to restorative justice. I mean, Toolbox is something that's very consistent, I think, with restorative justice, and in the sense that it's an alternative form to discipline. You know, it's more about self-control. And so I would actually rather kind of, you know, we put a lot of energy into Toolbox, and I would like to make sure that we are continuing to do professional development, you know, as we get new teachers, as we get classified staff, new classified staff, or I don't know if all classified staff have been trained yet in Toolbox at the elementary school level. I'd rather put money in that and kind of have that as a program that we really saturate in elementary school, and then saturate the restorative justice where Toolbox is not as effective in secondary school. So I would kind of look at that as being how we spend our money. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a great thing at Washington and it wouldn't be a good thing at other school. I just think, you know, I rather saturate things that we know are making a difference, that are, you know, that, and we know that there's a difference with Toolbox at the elementary school and, you know, doesn't really work as much at the higher schools.
So I want to start by saying that I do recognize the incredible amount of work that went into this, and I agree with Director Daniels that this was a really clear presentation, and also represents a huge amount of education of the community and work with both the PAC and the EAC to get us to this point. So that's really, that's all, it's just puts us in a place where we can kind of start really teasing out some of the specifics. I wanted to speak for a moment about the restorative practices piece, since I am, I'm on the Restorative Practices Advisory Committee, and there's 2 subcommittees. One of them is the Roadmap Subcommittee, and one of them is the Matrix Subcommittee. And I went to participate in the Roadmap Subcommittee in part because I wanted to help make this one conversation, so we're not kind of coming up with 2 different proposals. And I do agree that we don't want to spread ourselves thin, and I felt from that meeting like we do have some really smart interventions or additions, most of which are reflected here. There's some tweaks, but some interventions that could really help institutionalize restorative practices. So I think it's interesting that there's this conversation about a second pilot site, because I knew that was in the plan, and after listening to this conversation and that conversation, I'm actually thinking, I do think it's important to put some money in the K through 5, probably with early adopters, to really train them to start really having our kids do circles, and some very simple steps, as it came up in today's meeting. It's not it's not super complicated to do circles, and especially for teachers who feel comfortable doing it. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm taking too long. Anyway, so I think there might be something to look at there about putting, instead of a second site, to actually really have some teachers or some who are really trained to do the SEEDS training or something, the 5-day training beforehand, and work with the Washington teachers to model some of those circles. And one of the things, I mean, I think you're going to present about restorative practices next meeting, but I do think there are ways to kind of, if we have a commitment and some allotted times for that. So I think we might want to look at that, although I'm really excited about what's happening at Washington. It's really encouraging. The report was really exciting. The second thing is the middle school. So the way that we've talked about it is K through 5, and then middle school and high school. So I wanted to also mention that in the middle school, these 3 positions are a huge commitment. I support it. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not those positions should be counselors or those positions should be classified, kind of higher skilled paraprofessionals, and use the existing counselors to be able to have more capacity to supervise interns. So I think there's a conversation. I think there's some different folks who have different opinions, particularly questioning how many counselors of color we're going to be able to get, thinking that the restorative practices coordinators should be reflective of the kids who they're the targeted students that that we're hoping to work with through these positions. So I mean so I think that you should expect to hear more about that at the next meeting. So I think that I just wanted to mention that I personally am not sure where I will vote on that, but I do think just as far as maybe that's question 3, I think that's a change. And then in the high school piece, I wanted to mention Eddie's doing a great job, the person who's currently the coordinator, and if we could have more money for more of him, that would be great. I also wanted to really commend the second Jasdeep, the second, what's the name of that position? Intervention counselor. And even though that's not put here as a part of the restorative practices allocation, it's in the first goal. In my opinion, it's a part of goal 3 as well. It's an overlap. So I wanted to bring that to people's attention. So I think that this is a really good start. I'm hoping there's some openness over the next couple of weeks to look at some of the, we have a meeting on Friday, and I think we'll all have a chance to talk through some of the specifics. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was I appreciate that you put in another RTI .4 position for Malcolm X. I think it's something we need. I'm a little concerned that that's the only school, if we're working towards an allocation model that appropriates based on size of school body, that it not only be Malcolm X, where I know we've heard a lot from Malcolm X, but it's my understanding that some of the other large schools also, if we were to use a proportionate model, could use some more RTI support, and maybe that wouldn't come through LCAP, but it's something that I'd like to see maybe through the SPED budget when we hear an update on that in the near future.
And I do want to say, as we're looking at the additional support for Malcolm X, and that was based on size, we also need to look at not only size, but the number and the percentage of unduplicated students at the site. So we need to take that into consideration.
So I emailed everyone a folder, and it has a few supporting documents, and there's a document that looks like this, and it shows you the FTE allocation for each of the sites, for all of the current actions and services, as well as the percentage and number of unduplicated students at each of the schools. So when you have a chance, click through the folder and you'll find this. It's called LCAP staffing allocation.
So are there any other programs, we've talked about restorative practice and support, are there any other actions and services?
Yeah, just one thing on process is, Director Sadler, the documents that you emailed us, are those going to be made public on the website?
Yeah, they'll go up on the website after this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be helpful if there's any way to have those be posted on the website right at the beginning of the meeting, so that if members of the public can follow along as well.
Sure, thank you.
I have some thoughts and questions about restorative practices, but luckily I'm also on the restorative practices work group, so I can talk about that when we have our meeting next week. I'll just say a couple things. I'm inclined to agree with Director Daniels and Director Hempel about the elementary school, even though I understand what the value that it has at K-5, and it's great to hear about Washington. I'm anxious to hear more. To me, the investment in restorative practices is a response to one of our highest priorities, which is to fund adequately alternatives to traditional forms of exclusionary discipline and to reduce the racial disproportionality of our discipline practices. And that's a problem. It's not a problem really at the elementary school because we've reduced suspensions so much, but it is still a problem in the middle schools and the high schools. So, so if the pilot is working at K-5, that's great. And as sort of Director Hempel said, she's not here anymore. If we can somehow at some point in the future expand it to all the elementary schools, that's great. But for me, in terms of triage, funding another elementary school versus putting those resources at the high school in particular, I lean towards the high school, particularly because, as Director Appel said, the current RJ coordinator, or whatever Eddie's title is at Berkeley High, seems to be doing a great job. $50,000, if I understand it right, sort of got us essentially a full-time position because we started so late this year. So I guess a question that I have is whether $50,000 would even fund a full-time position next year at the high school, and if not, then I would feel even more strongly about putting those funds into the high school. Can I ask about the $215,000 for the after-school coordinator? So, can you say a little bit more about that? How much will each elementary school get from that, and how will it be used?
So it's in the document that I sent you. So could you all open up your Gmail, your Google Drive, and pull up the document? I think that would be helpful for that part of the conversation. I just sent it.
Wait, sorry, we have to wait to have that conversation.
Can we just finish the conversation first? Can we finish the conversation on this? And
That was
then
my
we'll
fault.
go
My
back
fault. We'll
to
go
it?
back. We'll come back to that.
Got another one, Ty?
After I leave.
No, does he have another one?
It's like this.
I'm good for right now.
Okay.
Okay. So, again, this is really good. Go ahead. We'll go back to you'll go back to that other conversation. Well, I'm glad that all of our board members sit on committees, and that gives us a lens in terms of where are these students and what are ways that we can support them better through our LCAP funding, especially as we're targeting our special populations. My committee is that I'm on, where I get to hear the real stories of one-on-one stories of both families and students, is on the Students Attendance Review Board. And that's where we see students from our elementary who have been truant and absent, and the struggles both our parents and our students go through. And my question to myself every time that I'm on this board and I hear this is, how did it get to this point? And when I look at this LCAP, how is our LCAP addressing those students who are truant and absent? I know there are special populations, typically and mostly there are African American and Latino students, rarely are Asian families, but rarely are some of our white students, but where in this LCAP, and I know we have positions that attend both our secretaries and our attendance officer at Berkeley High, but still, we are still finding students that have been absent 111 days and truant, and nobody saw them. Where in the LCAP are we addressing those particular those students? How are we capturing them, either through our family engagement, but I don't see them identified also in our LCAP.
So that's being supported through the LCAP funding with our Family Engagement Office, which is funded through LCAP and also through BSAP. And the site coordinators are at elementary schools. Their number one priority is to do case management and support of families of truant students with high absenteeism. They're not necessarily truant, but high absenteeism. And then through not through LCAP, but through general fund, we have the Dean of Attendance at Berkeley High. We have a lot of positions in the district, but those that are funded strictly through LCAP are the site coordinators in the Family Engagement Office.
In addition, that is one of our identified metrics in Goal 3, and it is addressed through the family engagement coordinators, although I don't have the LCAP in front of me. It's in the data that I provided you a couple weeks ago and then resent today. So it is on the final slide under the family engagement. We provide them with a list of the chronically absent students at the beginning of the year, the family engagement coordinators, and we track that throughout the year. One of the indicators that they write within their communication logs and within the log, and this is an action step within the LCAP, is they indicate, you know, who they've met with and what the action they've provided, and then we track that and we follow that and measure attendance and truancy, tardies, all of that throughout the year.
Yeah, there are people, and we still see a large population of students and I always wonder how many of these students still are not here in front of the SAR board, our Student Attendance Review Board, so that we can plug them into these wonderful programs and programs that we're funding in a very healthy way. You know, maybe could fund more, but certainly we didn't capture them. They got missed. And so these are students who are getting D's and F's. These are students who need counseling. These are students who need intervention. So I don't know. We know they're there, and we're addressing them with these different positions, but they're not here when we see this presentation. And so how can we make that transparent and showing our public that we're also attending to our students through these programs?
And just to note on the additional thing that I will, to Director Alper's point, I will also be posting, this is an update, the data that we provided to the PAC Advisory Committee included in an update on this for this board item, so the public can see that as well. And so it will be transparent. It is in full.
I spoke earlier with Dr. Craig about a focus, a training district-wide on the importance of attendance of our students and how we can monitor that more carefully through training for our secretaries, through our principals, even our teachers, that our teachers are not noticing that a student's been absent 100 days, 20 days. That's something that, for me, is impressive, that we're not getting that message across, perhaps in a more thoughtful way, in a meaningful way, to why this matters to us.
So what I'm hearing from you, and it's a very valid concern, is under the third bullet that this is a concern that the high absenteeism rate of a number of students really needs to be tied into LCAP. There are ways that maybe we could bring it back with the next draft. Just one example is if we increase the mental health support, that somehow that could be tied in, some of those increased dollars could be tied in to specifically supporting students who are truant. That would be one example.
I'm just thinking it's more, and I don't know if it's in their job description, to monitor absence and truancy for the different new positions that we would have. That's also part of not just the secretary, it's not just the principal, but there are these other principals, the other people who have access to Power School that can potentially give the alert. There's a student that's not been present.
So we can talk a little bit about that one in the third bullet, because that is a concern that we can address.
I had one more comment in terms of the restorative justice in our elementary schools, and that is, I would like a stronger focus on the fourth to fifth grade in restorative justice and keeping to the toolbox and the PBIS and the lower grades, and train our fourth and fifth graders to be the restorative justice that goes out into the classrooms and models it. And then perhaps we can do maybe another elementary school, not just one, but focus on the fourth to fifth graders as they transition to the sixth grade. And so it's a stronger focus in building that network and those leaders versus having one person spread over K to 5. I think we might get a little bit more from both our students and our trainers. So if we can focus on the fourth and fifth graders, because the toolbox is a great tool that a lot of our elementary students are using and our teachers are using. So why put more into it?
Okay. So two comments. One is that for example, at Washington, one thing they are doing is building the ability of the 4th and 5th graders to be conflict managers using the restorative justice principles. So that is happening. And then in terms of monitoring attendance, another place where that happens very much so is in the coordination of services teams. And we're getting better and better at those teams and developing them to have more of a lens on some of those indicators, and attendance is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I know that our middle schools, it's been improved, but as noted, we're just right here in attendance. It hasn't gotten much better, and I think it could. And so in my input in terms of the plan, just making it more out there in terms of how this plan is addressing the attendance and truancy of our students. Who are those students that we need to focus on and shine the light on?
And you have great foresight, because that's definitely one of the state indicators. I saw the data. I actually had to work through the rubric around our district attendance, and we were not in what they call the blue zone. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Madam President, process-wise, and Superintendent, are you just wanting us to air concerns, or are you also hoping for us to resolve them?
No, not resolve.
Just
them.
air.
So what are your concerns so that we can go back and look at these
Okay.
issues?
Okay.
And so what I've heard so far is restorative practice and looking at possibly putting more resources in at the secondary, but also looking at some of the elementary schools as well. And as Maggie said, is that we are looking at some of the things in terms of the training, looking at our 4th and 5th graders as, I don't want to use the conflict managers, but they're like that. So some of these things that we will take, well, all of these things we will take back, but I do want to remind the board that we do have an advisory board council that we also want to take into consideration what they have to say as we're putting all this together and bringing it back to the board. So that's all I've heard so far is around restorative practices. Are there any other things in Cs and so forth? And attendance, I'm sorry.
Because I think, for one, is I have the impression that there are a lot of hands in the soup for attendance, and so that might be some of the issues, like maybe some of the handoffs aren't happening, or, it's, if, that there's a role of a principal in monitoring attendance and setting up SARB. There's the family engagement workers that, based upon data that they receive, are supposed to be maybe working with families informally, but also recommending SARB. But is that handoff then happening, right? That because you recommend it doesn't mean that it gets to where it needs to be acted upon, and then it's set up. So, so one thing would be is if we have so many absence, I mean, one of the things I know that the high school did was that something I think they worked on, because I think there were several of us on the board or in high places of administration who got these letters to our embarrassment, having children who were seniors, inviting us to a SARB meeting for our graduating senior. And that was something that was unheard of Berkeley High. And this was, after 5 absences, you were getting those letters. And, it used to be, seniors could, were missing, many, many days, and no one ever, that was not information that necessarily parents, particularly if you had kids who knew how to get to the phone and erase messages before you. So anyway, so I'm just saying is that I think that there was a concerted effort to kind of, I think, shore up some of those handoffs and make sure that those that are taking attendance, that it's being inputted correctly, and then those that have that information are working on that, and then that if it gets to a SARB, that handoff is happening and those letters get out. So I think it's the whole process. And then where do we need to put resources, if need be, to make sure that process is working? Because I saw the difference at the high school.
So thanks. So I want to move us along. So we're about 13 minutes over.
Dr.
This
Evans,
particular.
can I just ask real quickly? We did have the objective in the package of trying to get some direction on the positions that were in pre-existing in 16-17, so we can move forward with hiring. Is there any opposition, or can we move forward with?
I mean, I think if you haven't heard an objection to something
Great.
that's been listed, then by all means utilize the authority in the bylaw
For the timelines issue.
to move forward. Just make sure to reference the bylaw in terms of for each one, make sure it more or less fits those conditions. But I think for all of these, it does.
Okay.
Yes, and this has all really been vetted with both stakeholder groups. I've taken it to PAC. I've also taken what you're seeing tonight, to EAC.
I do think that there were some comments on the items that President Leyva Cutler needs to recuse herself from. So if, Superintendent, I just wanted to
Yes.
remind you that
Thank you.
we're not quite there.
Yeah,
why
I
don't
wanted
we do
to,
that now?
so,
Vice President will lead.
we want to.
Ty just wants to run the board meeting.
Should we do that now?
So are there any comments on the items that our board president recused herself on? Do anybody have any concerns around that?
So I had that question.
That's right.
I'm sorry?
What was your question?
My question was, sorry, what are you saying, Pat?
Were you able to pull this?
Oh,
back
yeah.
up?
So Director Sadler's asking us to pull up this document called,
It's called version 7A, proposed LCAP staffing allocation. It's in the folder that I sent you all just probably an hour ago. I can put it up. Would that be helpful? Can I take a question now?
the one with the 3 columns, 16, 17, 17, 18?
No, there's multiple columns. It looks like this. I'll pull it up.
Oh, okay. I got it.
I probably have it on my desk.
Oops, I found it. Okay.
I can't, because it varies. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was my question? My question was, how much will each school get, and what are we expecting them to get for what they'll get?
So we did a per student allocation based on the number of unduplicated students. It is in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Column 6, it says LCAP after school allocation. And so you can see what the proposed breakdown would be. And our recommendation would be to have credentialed teachers delivering intervention after school in both ELA and math for the targeted students. And I believe Director Riddle would oversee what materials are used as well as what the intervention model would be. We also have had conversations about schools having some flexibility.
So that will definitely strengthen that alignment between what's happening in school and after school. And if we're going to close the achievement gap, this is something that we have to do.
My question is, and I guess maybe, I don't know if Jefferson is a good lab, but how difficult is it to get certificated teachers to take these jobs after school? Is there any concern about filling all these positions?
Yeah, there is concern about it, and we've spoken to the principals several times already, and they're very enthusiastic about it. At Jefferson, it varied, but we ran an extremely strong program for about 10 years, and it's still running, and it was only taught by certificated teachers. And we, at different times, it was different grade levels, but we ran from kindergarten through 5th in 6 to 8 week cycles. And so teachers rotated, so they could commit to like 6 weeks on a specific intervention and then take a little break and then come back at it again. So we can't say that for 100% what that's going to look like, but the principals are on board for sure.
So just to follow up, this isn't going to be replacing existing after-school programs. This is an independent from any school site.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this would be embedded in what we call LEARNs. And I was
Okay.
one of the principals that advocated for this. I felt like I used a lot of my site funds to pay teachers to work after school because I felt like they would be the most effective with the students most in need. And so this is a way to kind of give the schools a little relief. As well as, you know, several of our sites are losing their Title I funding next year, and that's the type of funding, as a principal, I used to fund it. So I think the timing's impeccable.
So this wouldn't be replacing, it wouldn't be supplanting LEARNs, but
Not
it
at
would
all.
be supplanting site dollars.
That's right.
So this is what's already going on at sites.
Yeah, but it's not at this level because it's piecemealed based on how, you know, the funding that's available at the sites. So it's not a consistent program. It's not a program that's directed by the district. And the district is not telling the sites which students to target, where we'll be doing that. So it would be very different.
Okay.
Just as the institutional memory, this was the year 3 action step that was promoted the first year, and there was not enough funding for it, and so it was written into year 3 of the LCAP the first year.
Is at the sites that are where the after-school program is, for lack of a better word, segregated between Learns and Bears. If this is going through Learns, will this money be able to support kids who are in Bears?
Yeah, so it would happen during the time of Learns and Bears, and the targeted students would need to be pulled out of whichever program to get the services. Yeah. But you would want the students enrolled in Learns or Bears so that there's a safety net for them. There's a place where they sign in the afternoon before they go to the assigned teacher. They get a snack, and then they go and they do their academic intervention.
Is this what,
So
can I
what-
ask, sorry, can I just ask one more question on this? Is this one of the items that we need to, I assume it's not, that we need to approve tonight in order to make anything happen? So we can't approve, I mean, not approve it, but not object to it?
It doesn't have an impact on the hiring timeline.
Okay.
No, and it's already board approved in the current three-year LCAP plan that we have, but we wanted direction from you do you think this is an adequate way to do it, dividing it per student, per site, or is there some other way that you'd like to see us address this need for intensive intervention led by credentialed teachers after school in a more consistent way?
So my question is that, what about those schools that do not have a Learns program? John Muir and Jefferson. I mean, obviously you were doing it kind of on a site basis, but if it's a district program, is this going to be built into the contracts with, I mean, how is that going to be handled?
So both John Muir and Jefferson have Bears programs. So they do have district-sponsored after-school programs. So we'd have a place where we could have some accountability for, especially for the younger students. We wouldn't want them just on the school campus waiting to go see the teacher. And we definitely feel like they need to get snack and, have an opportunity to have a break before they jump into the intervention after school.
Well, there are supposed to be some scholarships or other ways of making sure that the two programs have some diversity in them.
Right.
So what about a student that is not in Bears but is a targeted is eligible as a targeted
So
student?
at Jefferson, I know there's scholarships because we've worked a lot with the Jefferson After School program this year, as well as at John Muir. There's kind of a mix of Bears kind of Learns program. There weren't enough students really for either program, so it's kind of a hybrid program, and we would do the same thing with the lead teacher there.
Okay, and so a little bit of a different topic, but I am very interested in I understand why we have programs that are not district programs for after school, based upon them not being Title I schools, and that's where the funding comes from, but I have long been disturbed by not having a consistent after-school program that is closely aligned with our district goals. And so I think this to me is an example of, I don't know about when we look at our contracts as they come up to make sure that that third-party vendors, in fact, are aligned with everything from how we do restorative justice, how we do toolbox, that they do toolbox, all of that. I think if they're going to be on our site, that they need to be aligned, or we need, there are other vendors out there.
And we totally agree with that.
Yeah, Director Pell, and then we should wrap it up soon.
So, in answer to that question, I think that this is a great initiative, and I really appreciate the way that you decided to allocate the funds, or recommend that we allocate the funds by student.
And if I could just say, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I feel like I could use more information maybe the next time this comes before us about how exactly this would work and interact with Learns at the sites. So just a little more information I think would be helpful for me personally.
So I'm going to move us along to the last bullet. I know I heard one suggestion in terms of what Josh, Director Daniels stated, and I heard about attendance. Are there any others that you would like us to look at?
Well,
Any proposed additions?
I feel like 2 and 3 are really related, and we've been kind of...
We kind of did go back and forth.
Oh, I did want to say, though, that I support Director Daniels bringing up, again, this idea of a rotating loan fund. And I don't know, even if it was a relatively small amount that we started with, to see how it could work with a couple of of our classified staff and then tweak it, I support that. We have, some of the money maybe in the reserves, since it's a rotating fund.
So if there are not any other additions, increases, or changes that cause you concern, we can take what we've heard, and we will bring this back on April 20th at our next board meeting.
So that's when we can address more questions.
Great. Thank you, and thank you, staff.
I can still give my suggestions to them, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we're on the next to be set one.
So now our BSEP planning process.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So, again, thank you, staff. So I'm bringing up Natasha Berry, who is our director of BSEP. So for everyone up here, everybody knows what BSEP is. It's our Berkeley Schools Excellence Program and contributes greatly to our schools. And for our viewers, our thousands of viewers that are watching out there, because of BSEP, we have the smaller class sizes, the libraries, the music programs, instructional technology, before and after school classes, and professional development for our teachers. The current BSEP measure expires at the end of 2016-17, and with the renewal that goes before the voters in November. This is the final planning report prior to the preliminary draft that we will be presenting at our April the 20th board meeting. And so this report that Natasha is going to bring before us tonight summarizes what we've done up to this point. And it addresses our three major components in the planning process. So I'm going to turn it over to Natasha.
And we've allocated a total of 40 minutes.
Okay. So actually, Judy, you've done a great job facilitating BSEP. So after Natasha presents, do you want to facilitate this piece? Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent and board and staff. Actually, I want to begin with, again, congratulating the district and the Berkeley taxpayers on this latest upgrade in the bond rating for the school district, because I believe that it connects to at least three really strong components, one of which does connect fairly directly to BSEP. One is, of course, the fiscal stewardship of this district. Another is the community we live in and how strong the local economy is. And I also know that one of the components that the rating agencies looked at was the fact that this community supports its schools. So the parcel tax, BSEP, and then the other parcel tax that we have, it was an element that they strongly considered. They looked at us as a whole and said that as a school district operation, as a community, and as schools, we are really in great shape. And I really don't want us to lose track of how important it is that we have a community that so strongly supports our schools. BSEP being, of course, one of the major elements in that fiscal strength over the years for this district since 1986. Now that we're embarked in planning for the next measure, which, as the superintendent mentioned, will go before the voters in November, this will be my last update before I bring you a draft on April 20th. So wanted to just remind us that the main things that are components of this measure renewal are making a decision about the term, how long it lasts, what the tax rate is, what the measure purposes and allocations are. And within those purposes and allocations, we have decisions to be made, whether we are going to maintain the current purposes, whether we're going to make some changes, whether it's possible to reduce or adjust in any way. One of the largest components of the BSEP measure is, of course, the class size reduction component, and that's been a significant focus of the conversations and budget modeling that we've been engaged in for the last, well over a year. And then finally, ultimately, you'll be looking at the structure of the measure and the language, which will be coming to you in 2 weeks. So, as was mentioned previously, there are three components that are really engaged in an iterative process, looking at the educational priorities that are involved in BSEP, looking at the budgetary component of BSEP, and then the public process, which means speaking to our voters, speaking to our families, our staff, and coming back around through each of these components throughout this last year. So I just have list there. You have a longer list in the board packet of all of the meetings that have been conducted over the last year. This is a summary of the types of meetings that we've had, although I think I omitted board meetings from the list, and that shouldn't be neglected. But as we began this process, we began with some initial questions, we began with some initial budget scenarios, and then as we had continuing conversations with our staff, with our families, other questions arose. And so each one of these meetings has not been the same as the other. Everyone has seen slightly different budget scenarios that have evolved and raised different questions. I'm just going to highlight a few of them this evening so that when I come back to you in 2 weeks, we'll have a little bit of a context for the kinds of issues that have been raised throughout this process. So, for example, in terms of the budgetary overview that people have had, this is just a very quick summary of the more detailed components that we've looked into as we've reviewed the kinds of changes that have hit our district over the last 10 years since the last BSEP measure. Some of them positive, or at least fiscally positive. Those are indicated in black. When the BSEP revenues went up, when Prop 30 was renewed, when more funding came into the schools, with LCAP, those were all positive. We've had some challenges, including the Great Recession. We've had a significant challenge in terms of the court ruling on a uniform tax rate, meaning that when we go out for our next measure, we must have the same tax rate for commercial and residential property owners. We have challenges in terms of some mandated costs coming to us from the state in terms of the state retirement systems. And other increases in costs that are not keeping pace with the BSEP revenues, which only go up with the cost of living increase, the COLAs, which have been quite low. So we've reviewed that both in our budget models group and with the public as best we could to kind of simplify these fairly complex variables. And we've created budget models so that we could share in these various meetings an idea of what we need to consider as we think about what to make sustainable coming into the next measure. So we need to look out across the next 8 to 10 years and our best guess about what might be happening in terms of enrollment patterns. We have, of course, worked with a demographic group, and we have our own experience to guide us. That feeds into, of course, how many teachers, staff, and classrooms we might need. We've looked at compensation costs, including benefits, and especially, as I mentioned, the retirement costs, STIRS and PERS, which are going up significantly. We've looked at possible models for BSEP tax rate and revenue. So those two are, of course, closely connected. What the rate is together with what the cost of living increases might be would be a prediction of what our revenue is. We can only take our best guess as what might be happening. Fortunately, we are partnered with people like Deputy Superintendent Cleveland, who has a lot of experience in this, and she's been, and her team are very deeply involved in creating these models with us. We also look at class size. We've mostly been focusing on the elementary class size. That's the largest component. But as you know, BSEP reduces class sizes across TK-12. We've focused primarily at looking at our current model of 20 and 26 in the elementary grades and comparing it to a number of different options. Balanced is the term we've been using at under 24 to 1. That is, as I think you know, the new state target for K through 3. We've been looking at that for K through 5, and we've looked at various options around that number. The reason that we've been doing that is not just a fiscal reason, but also because we are currently living with class size configurations that inherited from previous models that have been challenging in some ways. So as you know, K through 3 with a 20-to-1 ratio in our smaller schools presents a challenge when we get to 4th and 5th grade, as the target number of 26 is hard to achieve, and we have several schools that have elected to have larger 4th and 5th grades if they're in this situation as is exemplified in this chart, where you're looking at 3 third grades of around 60 kids. Trying to divide that by 26 doesn't work unless you go to a combination class scenario, which is an option used by 2 or 3 of our schools currently, or you go for the larger classes. So that is a logistical issue that we are struggling with. And one of the possible solutions to that issue, which also happens to be an option which would be more fiscally sustainable, is one in which we balance our class sizes. So starting at a slightly larger kindergarten, where we've looked at models starting at 22, we've looked at models starting at 23. Actually, we've looked at, I think, every possible number between 20 and 24 and fractions thereof, multiple scenarios. So this is just a simplification of the scenarios where you begin at 22 or you begin at 23. And then we build in a little bit of growth in keeping with what we've been experiencing historically, most recently. So seeing what that does and where that leads us by 4th and 5th grade, and you can see that both beginning at around 22 or beginning at around 23, we end up with classes that are much more balanced in terms of their sizes, and we have smaller 4th and 5th grades. And that issue of being able to support our students with small classes across elementary has been a major topic of discussion. So one of the points when we've engaged in these discussions with the community is to point out that this balancing doesn't happen overnight. It would need to be phased in gradually. You do not suddenly shift kids from one school to another. So it would begin with our first year of our measure in kindergarten, and then it will take 6 years for that balance to be achieved. The balance would be achieved such that all of the K-3 classes would need to be below 24, and perhaps significantly below 24, but somewhere below 24, in order to qualify for the current new California class size reduction target. And an advantage to this is, as was shown previously, we would have no more combination grade classes, and we would have smaller 4th and 5th. Furthermore, over time, by implementing this process, we would gradually restore flex rooms, which I know the board is very aware has been a concern at many sites with our enrollment growth and maintaining the very small class sizes. We have been running out of space, and that is something that was pointed out when planning for the current measure, the Measure A of 2006, when the focus groups were looking at what to do. It was pointed out that there could be both fiscal and facilities issues should there be continued growth, and that is what we're encountering now. So you have a much longer summary in your board packet, but I just thought I'd hit a few of the top topics that have come up when we presented the BSEP to the community groups. As you know, we've been doing that by having meetings, starting with the big one we had in this boardroom, and then I've been going around the district at various sites, and we've asked people to look at these budget models and reflect to us what they think about the concept of balanced class sizes. Overall, at least 2/3, I would say, are in favor of this balance. That people see a lot of appeal to that. They see advantages in terms of the restoration of flex rooms, in terms of the advantages for the 4th and 5th grade students. Many have commented that it wouldn't be a significant change. Our classes would still be small, but I don't want to also gloss over the fact that there are also a number, mostly staff and some parents, who are concerned in the lower grades about what effect this might have, and they do want to be sure that whatever we implement, we remain focused on meeting the needs of our very heterogeneous classrooms, and that there are significant supports for our teachers and for our students built into BSEP and elsewhere. Of course, BSEP, along with LCAP and along with the general fund, there are multiple resources, and not all problems are solved uniquely by BSEP. But people want to see reflected in BSEP some top community values, including smaller class sizes, including supports, direct supports for students. And some of those supports for students, not everyone knew were in BSEP. That's one thing I've found as I've gone around the district. People don't know, for example, that BSEP pays for libraries. They just don't know. So, we clearly need to do a better job of letting people know that there are supports that are provided by BSEP other than small class sizes. All of the library supports, the middle school counseling, that was another big surprise to people to find out that that nearly 5 FTE of middle school counselors are paid for out of BSEP. That there are other supports such as response to intervention was news to many. Of course, I think a lot of people tend to think BSEP music, and that's really, that's 6% of what BSEP does, but there's so much else that it does. And the other thing that I've been hearing consistently is that people see some of these, what people when I first came into this position, people said, oh, BSEP, it's the enrichment project, which is what it used to be called. It's now called the excellence program. And what I've been hearing repeatedly is that some of these things, library, music, technology, many of the programs provided through site funds may be considered enrichment, but they are also considered equity in terms of affording access to everybody at every school. It doesn't depend on whether your PTA can raise funds. These are the things that we believe every child needs access to. So those are a few of the main themes that have emerged in our community conversations. Then to our voter poll, and again, your packet has some data on this. You know that we conducted a voter poll in the fall, and then we had a subsequent one in the spring, asking a few of the same questions were repeated and have been repeated over the years working with the same polling firm. So we saw in the spring, you saw an earlier version of this from the fall poll where we asked the same question. There's a 2% improvement. Probably not statistically significant. It was 57% of respondents believing that the school district was doing a good job in the fall. It's up to 59%. There are a number, of course, this total here is 79%. So there are 21% who did not have an opinion of the schools. And that's something else we need to be reminded of, is that while there may be strong opinions held within the schools, there are large numbers of voters who are not connected to the schools and don't know about it. But those who do know about it are thinking well of the schools, and increasingly so. And that connects to this other question where we asked whether people feel that these taxes that they're paying are essentially a good investment. It's worthwhile, that they're seeing that it's doing some good for our schools. And this 71 to 14% more or less mirrors also another related question which is asked in this voter poll, which is, would you support the tax? That has to be one of the first questions that is asked. And we end up with somewhere in the 70 to 75%, including people leaning towards supporting the renewal of the BSEP measure. As you may know, the City of Berkeley conducted its own poll on various things that the City of Berkeley was considering. They asked a version of our question. It wasn't asked exactly the same way. They came up with a slightly lower result, I think around 66%, but I feel more confident in the methods employed by our pollster in terms of the reliability of these results. So again, we're not, as you know, we need a 2/3 majority for BSEP to pass, and this is not far, far above, but it is above that 2/3. The voter poll also looked at people by major demographic groups, and these are the major demographic groups in which there was no significant level of difference. So income did not matter as to support for BSEP, gender, political affiliation, so much as there is much of a difference in political affiliation, white and non-white, although that masks a little bit of a difference among other subgroups, homeowners and renters are not significantly different. Remember that there's a margin of error of 4%, so anything within that bound probably can't be counted as significant. What could be significant is some of these elements, when people purchase their home. And the interesting thing is that the folks who purchased their homes more recently, who are probably paying a lot more for their homes, are in support of BSEP, far more so than those who've been in their homes longer. There could be a number of reasons for that. You also see that age is another distinctive difference, and whether that has to do with being distant from the schools, whether it has to do with the fact that your BSEP tax is showing up in your tax bill looking larger than your bond, because your bond is an ad valorem rate and is going to be tied to a lower valuation. That could be why. But again, when you look at parents versus non-parents, again, those who are closer to the schools, and the important thing to notice here is that it's, in terms of this poll at least, 26%. The numbers are even lower in terms of numbers within the City of Berkeley, but for those who were polled and likely voters, just 26% are parents, and they, of course, well, not of course, we're happy to see that the parents of the Berkeley Unified School District, and actually these are people who are just parent age, they may have children elsewhere, are thinking well of the schools. And then those who are students, so those are mostly college students, also in support. And then here's a distillation of the various components of BSEP. What was asked was a simplified version of what BSEP currently provides. Support for struggling students polled the very highest, which is a wonderful thing to see, that our folks in our city really care about meeting the needs of students who are struggling. And this was on a scale of 1 to 5, asking those who rated it 5, extremely important. So over 2/3 felt that that support is really very important. And next up was school libraries, then teacher training, small class sizes, parental involvement in schools, computers, school counselors. I mean, all of them were fairly high. The ones that polled lowest, I can't help but notice, also took the most words to explain what they are. So I think that may be one of the reasons that it's not necessarily that those are not valuable things. They're just a little harder to wrap your mind around if it takes that long to explain what they are. In fact, the one that polled the lowest is one that we know is extremely valuable to our schools, and that is the school site discretionary funds. But if we call them school site discretionary funds, no one would know what we were talking about. But it is good to see that overall there continues to be strong support for those elements of BSEP that are really well known and highlighted in our measure. So that's the quick update as to what we've been doing. There's still more work to be done. I'm continuing to go whenever asked to schools and community groups. We've done a lot of outreach. I have just went to Malcolm X today for the 3rd time and really appreciate the opportunity to hear from people. I am putting together a compendium of all of the input, and we'll summarize it as well as give you as much as we can of the raw data that was transcribed. We have a few more meetings going forward with community groups, and then we're also reviewing a beginnings of a draft where our latest model looks at another version of class size. We're trying to see whether we can afford to bring the balanced model down to a lower level, and see where that takes us in terms of the tax rate. I'll be reviewing that tomorrow with the BSEP budget managers and looking at each of the BSEP budgets to see where we are headed, and then that will also be looked at again on next Monday with the budget models work group. We'll be refining it further, looking at the language so that I can bring it on Tuesday next to the P&O committee, since the P&O committee really needs to have a first look before the final first draft is due. In order to get to you at the board on the 20th, I have to have it done by the 13th. But the P&O will discuss it again before you come back to you on the 20th, so I'll have additional feedback from them. You'll have a second look at it in May, and then ultimately in June, you'll have to make your decision on the measure language so that it can make its way to the ballot. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. And I want to also underscore the assistance from Deputy Superintendent Cleveland's office, and particularly Pauline Follensby, who is really, every time we have a meeting, we send back requests for 2 or 3 new models, and they're really detailed, and it's been very helpful in moving forward the process. So I guess I was looking to see if there was any specific questions. Are you looking for any specific guidance or questions for us to answer?
No, this really wasn't intended as a direction seeking. It was an update as requested prior to the next draft.
Okay, so it says receive and discuss. So I think we have 18 minutes left to discuss.
Good. I have a question in terms of how this measure will be introduced to the public, in terms of and as a district also, in terms of a question to ourselves, we now have TK. And so will this measure say TK, or will say K, continue to say K to 12?
We just discussed that today, and it seemed to us that if we say K-12, the TK can fall within that, as we've interpreted the current measure to be able to do that.
Okay, so I would just say, for the public and for the community that does have TK, to asterisk that, and that includes the transitional kindergarten, that they're part of the BSEP measure also.
Okay,
good. Director Alpert? Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it funds some RTI.
What about pre-K? So currently, we provide some funds via the site discretionary funds.
Can you go back to a slide about a third of the way through, the one that said class size K3 will be under an average of 24? Yeah, that one. I thought it was K5.
Yes, well, the measure would be written, so we're required in order to qualify for the funds from the state to have K3 below 24. But in the models that we are looking at have been models where, depending on where you begin, you would, at a maximum, end up below 24 by third grade, and then it could go up a little beyond that. So how we write that measure and how we model it, so there was a very confusing way that we began to articulate it. It worked for finances, but it didn't work to communicate, which was an average of 23.6, which meant starting kindergarten at 23 and allowing for the gradual kind of growth that we've been seeing of cohorts. So that actually got us to 23.6 between third and fourth grade, and it meant that fourth and fifth grade were about 24. And I know there's been a lot of concern because of people's experience of the 20 to 26 jump and the difficulties with managing that they have seen numbers, and also because it's been a district-wide average. That's the other thing that people have been very concerned about, is seeing that while we have these goals in the measure, often those numbers aren't necessarily what they experience at their school site, because A, it's a district-wide average, and B, the fourth and fifth grade challenge. So what we look at when we're looking at this balanced option is you would not be able to have those, there wouldn't be an option for a class of 30. It couldn't happen. You would be, growing slowly, and maybe you'd get, if you started at 23, you could imagine there might be some schools with fifth grade classes at 25, but there wouldn't be 30s. It just couldn't happen. But that doesn't mean that that's the model that we're going to end up with. Again, what we've been trying, as we've been hearing from people what they really value, and as we've been doing our best to figure out what we think also the voters might be willing to support, we've been looking at models that start out lower than that. And so we may be able to start somewhere below 23, and at that point we would be talking about a K5 average of something else, probably closer to 23 than 23.6. So the whole, but saying that, and the other question that people have asked is, will there be a cap? Can you cap classes? And that's, again, a logistically difficult thing to do. You have to sort of pick a point in time. The kids come into the district at odd times sometimes, and so we, would have to manage that as well.
So I get that about the cap. It does seem like it sounds like we might end up, though, being able to say that there will be a school-wide average of K5 below 24.
Yeah, right. Or yes, below 24 would be a wonderful thing to be able to afford. So that's what we're working on now, is whether we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that it's fair to say that the models that we're working on are school-wide. The balancing is the key. Yeah.
Right. That's why I was just thrown by this slide.
Yeah, this is an earlier iteration of the discussions that we've been having. So,
great.
Yeah, so we're now at a point where we're trying to see if we can go K5 below 24.
Other questions?
No, just
Karen?
thank you, and thank you
Wait,
for...
I was going
Director
to
Hemphill.
comment on that last statement about the safe flex rooms. I'm a little concerned about that one, because the retort could be, well, build a new school, and then we would have flex schools. So that's not necessarily, that's not necessarily the way that we're going to include, to make sure that all of our schools have flex rooms. So I'm a little concerned about that being challenged. It could happen, but it is not something that I would rely upon as, the statement to make.
I think that's a really important point, that while this model assumes, and again, there's so many assumptions built into it, many of which we cannot directly control, but there are, certain assumptions about enrollment, and then there are things that we don't know about the future, like whether there might be a new school or what's going to be happening with the economy, many unknowns. But the question another question I've been asked about flex rooms is there a guarantee of the number of flex rooms per school? And that is something that we haven't wrestled with, to say that there would be X number of flex rooms. That's also something that's sort of an ed specs question that I know is also being looked at in parallel. But we do know that under this model, there would be a return of some flex rooms at some sites.
Any other comments, Questions? Okay, thank you.
There's extended board, there's public comment. Is there anybody here for the public? Okay, then we have board comments and then our evaluation, which we didn't determine who would do.
I think it's Josh.
Josh? Okay.
Can you remind me what I'm supposed to do again?
It's on the back of it.
I'm looking, but I'd pick what, 4?
No, that's not it.
No? All right, to what degree did we frame agenda items with an introduction and a closure summary? I thought that for the 2 main items we discussed, that they were framed well and introduced very well. The LCAP item in particular, I thought the superintendent did a very good job sort of making it clear what he wanted from the board and keeping us to task on those items. Time to agenda items, that's always difficult. I think that we spent more time on the LCAP, less time on BSEP, but we were in the general ballpark. It's not even 10 o'clock and we're going to be done with 2 major items, so that's good. And those were like super important items in terms of what we will be doing in the next year. Address the fundamental problem as the root of issues, not just the symptoms. Yeah, I mean, I think I think in our discussions about the LCAP and the specific actions, we tried to focus on, for example, Madam President, you mentioned the issue of attendance. So I think we that wasn't as prevalent, but I think we did a solid job on that. And model mutual respect, effective interpersonal communication and civility. I think that today we did pretty good. We all like each other today, so that's good. Pretty well. Thank you, Director Dean Ty Alpert.
Superintendent?
Yeah, I just want to say that we had some sad news today that the parent of 2 of our kids was killed in a car accident today. So we are definitely providing counselors at the schools for those students.
Thank you, everyone, and to our staff.
And we're recessing back into closed session.
We're
isn't that
recessing,
correct?
yeah. Yeah, briefly. But we'll be recessing. Thank you, everyone.